One of the main differences between a good designer and a great designer is that great designers know how to build responsive layouts and modules. As an example, building a contact form that's responsive across device sizes, or a module for a landing page that's reactive based on the different device size that you select. So today, we're going to look at how to do just that within the context of our responsive variable collection. We're going to start off by looking at building out our type scales for each of our different device sizes before we look at our spacing variables, most notably our jumper variables that allow you to build responsive modules and widgets on the fly. Let's get started. Okay, so when we're building out our responsive variable library to build responsive designs, I always start with my type scale first. And if you already have a pre-existing brand, you might already have this. But again, you might not have it for mobile, you might not have it for tablet, or maybe you are just getting started. So let's start off with building out our responsive type scales to start. So let's start off with an H1, an H2. And again, we're going to go through and build all these out. H4, H3, H4, and H5, and H6. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add line heights for each of these values. So we're going to have our H1 line heights. H1 line height, if I can really spell. Perfect, there we go. Let's then go with a H2 line height, an H3 line height, an H4 line height, an H5 line height. All right, I know this is tedious. And then an H6 line height. And then we're also going to do the exact same, but for paragraph spacing too. And again, we're going to group all these variables a little bit later on. This is really just us getting started. So we might have a paragraph large, a paragraph be like your basic paragraph size. Maybe have like a paragraph small that might be used for something like captions. And then we're going to do the exact same thing as we did with our H tags. So we're going to have a paragraph large line heights. And you might hear a plane flying above me, get some noise there. Paragraph line height, and then a paragraph small line height. There we go. Perfect. So again, we're going to group all these a little bit later on, but what we're going to do is we're going to start off by building out our desktop, tablet, and mobile type scales so that our type is actually responsive before we start looking at some of our spacing. And we're going to look at that next. Okay, so one of the free micro tools that we have on our website is this typography scale generator. And essentially what it allows you to do is set your base paragraph size, number of heading levels you want, and it outputs the sizes of your headings based on the ratio that you select. Because again, you don't want to just randomly choose numbers for your type scale, because then you're going to have too larger jumps, too smaller jumps, without any real method behind it. And that's when your type scale is just going to look wonky. So what I always like to start off with when I'm building out my desktop type scales before we get into our tablet scales and then our mobile scales is I always like to start off with our major third. I think it always starts with a pretty decent size. And again, we can change these numbers when we want to a little bit later on. Now, one thing you're probably noticing here is the values turn out a little bit wonky. You don't want to have like a 48.8 pixel H2. And this is what we're going to do here is we're going to align these values to a specific grid. But this typography scale generator just gives us some basic numbers to get started with that do follow some type of scale. So in this case, our major third. So what I'm going to do, just so I don't have to flip back between Chrome and Figma, is I'm going to screenshot the values that it gives me here, and then I'm going to adjust these numbers so that it aligns to a scale in order to build a really nice type scale that's going to work on desktop, that's going to work on tablet, and that's going to work on mobile as well. Okay, so what I went ahead and did is I just took a screenshot of the output that our type scale generator gave us here, and we're going to use that to build out our responsive variable collection. One thing I would like just to get out of the way right off the bat is the sizes of our paragraphs. So I always like to set my base paragraph size to 16 because anything below 16 is you kind of do need to be a little bit more careful from an accessibility standpoint. I then like to set my paragraph small to 14. I also do see a lot of designers setting it to 12 here as well, but personally, I just like my paragraph small. I don't like the 12. I kind of like to use that for more of like a caption style. But if I do need a little bit of a smaller paragraph size, I like that set to 14 and not 12, just personal preference. And then I always set my paragraph large to 20. But it's our headings where there's a little bit more math involved, where it's a little bit more complex. Because as I called out, as I'm sure you noticed, the values that our type scale generator gave us based off the scale that we selected did give us some decimal values. So when it comes to my H tag, is I always like to align these values to a specific grid. And in this case, a 4-pixel grid. So if we look at our paragraph of 16, I can see that our H6 is giving us 20, which follows that 4-pixel grid. So I'm going to set that H6 to 20. Then if you look at our H5, the value that the output gave us is set to 25. What's the closest multiple of 4 to 25? 24. Now let's do our H4. So the closest multiple of 4 to 31.3, 32. Same with our H3. Closest multiple of 4 to 39.1 is going to give us 40. Closest multiple of 4 to 48.8, 48. And our closest multiple of 4 to 61 is going to give us 62. Or 60. Yeah, 60. Sorry. Moment of judgment there. Okay, perfect. So now that we have our sizes built out for our H tags and then also our paragraph sizes, let's now go ahead and look at our line heights, because this is where we do need to break out our calculator. So now what we want to do is actually calculate the line height that will serve for each of our H tags, then also for our paragraph as well. And this is a big mistake that designers make, is thinking that all your H tags need the exact same line height, but that's not the case if you want to build those really, really nice responsive type scales. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bust out the calculator on my phone here, and you should as well. And what we're going to do is take all of our values for our headings and our paragraphs and multiply them by 1.2 to get your line height. So essentially, we're just multiplying them by any type of decimal number. It could be 1.2 if you kind of want just like a moderate line height, 1.4. You can go 1, whatever it is to sort of build the look that you're going for. It doesn't need to be 1.2, but I'm going to do 1.2. So starting with our H1, so we're going to go 60 times 1.2. So our H1 line height is going to be 72. And then our H2, so 48 times 1.2, that's going to give us 57.6. And if we align that still to that 4-pixel grid, what that's going to give us is we need to set that to 56. And again, so still with your line heights, you're still following that same 4-pixel grid. Our H3, so 40 times 1.2, this is going to give us 48. Our H4, I hope we didn't make any mistakes here in the math. So our H4 is 32 times 1.2. This gives us 38. So closest multiple of 4 here is going to give us 40. Our H5, so 24 times 1.2 equals 28.8. So closest multiple of 4 is 28. And then our H6, so 28 times 1.2 is 24. And that follows the 4-pixel grid perfectly. So then let's do the same here for our paragraph sizes. So 20 times 1.2. So this is going to give us 24 as the line height for a paragraph large. And then let's go 16 times 1.2, which is 19.2. Closest multiple of 4 is 20. And then for a paragraph small, 14 times 1.2, 16.8. So this is going to be 16. So that's how we use our H tags in order to calculate the line height that is still going to give us that nice, crisp type scale. So now that we have this out of the way, let's now look at actually building out a type scale that follows our tablet and that works for our tablet and also for mobile as well. So now that we have our desktop type scale, let's now look at our tablet and also our mobile type scale as well, starting off with our tablet. So for our tablet, instead of following on the major third, because again, maybe it follows a little bit, it's just a little bit of a smaller size, same with mobile as well, is what we're actually going to do is we're going to select a different scale. So in this case, we're going to select our minor third for tablet. So the exact same process as we did for desktop, we're now going to do the same for tablet. So now that we have our minor third selected, I'm going to take a screenshot of these headings right here, bring them to our Figma, and then what we're going to do is go ahead and start building out our type scale for our tablet and then our mobile. Okay, so now that we have our tablet scale, let's go ahead and add in another mode for tablet, and I just called our first mode here desktop. So let's call the second mode here tablet, and then let's take the values that our type scale generator gave us based on the new ratio and translate them to our headings. One thing I would like to call out as well is that we're not going to change our paragraph values, either the paragraph sizing or the line height for desktop, tablet, or mobile. In my opinion, it's super important to have a lot of consistency in your paragraph sizes, especially for things like accessibility as well. So that's why we're not going to touch our paragraph sizes for tablet or for mobile. They're going to be consistent across all device sizes. Okay, so let's start off with our H1, and also maybe two. One thing I would like to call out here is this is more of a methodical approach to your tablet. I do see a lot of designers sort of mix and matching and choosing different values that don't necessarily align to a specific scale for their tablet, because it kind of is sort of a wonky size in between desktop and mobile. So here, our H1 is going to be 48, but sometimes I do see designers setting that to a little bit of a different value, just depending on how they want their designs to look. So maybe just keep that in mind. So our H2 here is then going to be 40, again, still following that 4-pixel scale. Our H3 is going to be 32. Our H4 is going to be 28. Oops, not 38, not 18 either, 28. And then our H5 is going to be 24. And then our H6 is going to stay the same. Yeah, so our H5, yep, it's 24. And then our H6 is also going to be set to 20. Now what we're going to do is let's go ahead and also calculate the line height out for this. So let me bring back out the calculator on my phone. So 48 times 1.2 is equal to 57.6. So this should equal 56 as our H1 line height for tablet. So that should equal 56. Our H2, so 40 times 1.2. This is going to equal 48. Our H3, so 32 times 1.2. This is going to equal 38. So we're going to set this to 40. Our H4, so 28 times 1.2. This is 33, so I'm going to set this, our H4, to 32. Our H5, so our H5 is 24. 24 times 1.2 this is equal to 28, so 28 is going to stay the same. And then our H6, 20 times 1.2 is set to 24, so our line height for our H5s is going to stay the exact same. Perfect, so there we have our desktop and our tablet. Now let's do one more for mobile. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken the liberty of going ahead and generating a new type scale that will work for mobile using the major second ratio. So I just did that, so you don't need to watch me do it because we already did it twice. I'm sure you get the drill by now. So here are the values that using that major second ratio gave us. So now let's add another mode here for mobile, and let's just shrink this in so we can see some of the other values as well. Okay, so starting with our H1 here, this is going to be set to 32. Again, following that 4-pixel grid. Our H2 is going to be 28. Our H3 is going to be 24. Our H4 is going to be also 24. So this is where in mobile, it is okay to have two H tags that do have the same value. Our H5 is going to be 20. And then our H6, we're going to round, this is right in the middle between 16 and 20, but because it's our heading, we're going to round that up to 20. So, sorry, our H5 is 20. Oops, I'm frozen here. So that's 20. And then our H6 is also going to be 20. Okay, so now let's do our line height here. So starting off with our H1. So let's look at 32 times 1.2. This is 38. So what we're going to do is we're going to set that to 40. Again, if I made any mistakes in the math here, just feel free to leave some comments below. I feel like I might have made one or two. Okay, so then our H2, so 28 times 1.2 is 33.6. So this is going to be set to 32. Now let me double check something here. Okay, yep, I did not make a mistake there. Perfect. Our H3, what do we have for H3? We have 24 times 1.2 is 28. So we know our H4 line height then, and also our H5. Oops, sorry, I think I made a mistake there. No, our H3, yeah, sorry, I didn't make a mistake there. So our H3 is 24, and our H4 is 24. So we know that both those values will be 28. And then let's look at our H5 and our H6. So 20 times 1.2 is 24. So we know our H5 and then also our H6 are going to be 24 for the line height. So now what we have here is we have type scales. One type scale that will work on desktop, tablet, and then also mobile as well. So now that we have this out of the way, let's go ahead and just real quick build out this type scale so you can see how these interact. Okay, so real quick, one thing I did is I just grouped our headings and our paragraph sizes and line height. So here we have our headings with their size and our line height, and also our paragraphs with their sizes and line height as well. And another thing I did, just real quick here, is I went and actually just build out a mini type scale of ours. where I went through and just applied the size and the line height to each of these values, all the way from our H1 all the way through to our H6. Now let's go ahead and look at building out our responsive spacing variables that really allows you to create those responsive designs. And there's a bunch of ways that you can do this. I'm just going to cover some of the basics at a high level. I'm not going to dive too deep into building out a fully responsive spacing collection, because a lot of this is actually dependent on your own designs. The spacing of designs in a bank would be different than spacing and designs at Amazon, as an example. So what you really need to do, and I'll touch upon this very shortly, is actually audit your designs to identify the proper spacing variables. But anyways, so it's still within our responsive collection. Let's go ahead and just create a new grouping, a new variable here. So a number variable that we're going to call just our frame size. And we're actually going to put this inside of a group that we're going to call spacing. So what we're going to then go ahead and do then is let's identify what sizes we want to have our desktop, tablet, and mobile. And again, this is the first step to building truly responsive designs, especially with the, updates to Figma since last year, where now you have these mode swapping, or really in just a couple clicks, you can show how your designs are responsive. So let's go into let me move that out of the way. So let's go ahead and add a frame here, starting off with our desktop. And maybe we just want to use that basic desktop size, so 1440. So let's then go ahead into our local variables here, into our spacing variables for our frame, and set our desktop size to 1440. Let's then do the same at tablet as well. So for a tablet, maybe we want to go with the iPad 11 Pro. So this is going to be 834. So 834 is the other size, 834, 834. And then also for mobile as well, let's maybe go with a 16 plus, so 430. So then let's go ahead into our local variables and set that spacing to 430. There we go. So now what we can do is we can apply that variable at the width level itself. So we're going to apply the spacing variable for our frame size, and that's going to set that to 1440. Let's just add a fill here. So then what I can do at the overall frame level itself is that I can then apply the proper mode. So right now it's set to desktop. If I want that set to tablet, notice how the sizes of our text also adjust, and so does the frame size. And then if I apply mobile, I can see the exact same thing happen. So it adjusts to those nice mobile sizes. So again, that's the real first step to building responsive design. Next, what we're going to do is actually start to look at building out our spacing variables and how we might audit designs to understand what variables we need to add to our collection. So when it comes to setting up your spacing variables, one thing that's really important to call out is that you can't populate your spacing variables if you don't have reference design to go off of. So whenever I chat with designers or companies who are building out their variable library, or if I'm helping them do it, and they don't yet have any designs yet, it's really hard to build that spacing library without any reference designs, because you ultimately don't know what your designs are going to look like, and spacing will play a big factor in this. Now, just as a reference here, now I have two sample screens from the Untitled UI design system. I'm sure everyone's familiar with it. It's one of the most popular design systems out there, and they are a community partner of ours. So registered members or approved members of UI Collective do get a discount on Untitled UI. And I will put a link for their design system in the description of this video. Jordan did a fantastic job with this design system. But if we look into some of their designs, and this is the process that you would need to follow if you're building out those spacing variables, is understand the different variables widths that you're using in your current designs, whether it's a dashboard or a landing page, so on and so forth. So let's take a close look here. So if we click in, what's a couple things that we notice? Okay, so Jordan's using a 96 top padding. If we click in a little bit further, we have 32, we have another 32. So you're almost going block by block, design by design, and dissecting the variables that you're using. So you're almost sort of conducting your own miniature audit to identify the variables that you're going to need in your spacing. And again, Untitled UI does a fantastic job with organizing their spacing variables. So again, we see 96, and then if we flip over to the mobile, we see a 64. So then we have a better idea as to how we should structure our variables accordingly across those different mode sizes. So again, we see another 96, we see another 32. So it looks like multiples of 32. We see 64, we see another 32, we see another 32, another 32, another 96, and a 64. So it looks like what Jordan's doing is using a lot of multiples of 32. So in this case, not sticking to that 4-pixel grid, but a little bit of a different approach to things. So what we're going to do next is, now that you have a base understanding as to how you can identify for the variables that are going to be included in your system, it's not as simple as just taking these and plugging them into your variables. Because again, you might have a 96 on one, and then on mobile it might be a 64. But let me click in here and we see what this is. And on mobile it might be a 64. But in every use case, you're not going to go from a 96 to that 64 itself. So we're actually going to introduce a concept called jumper variables. But again, this here is just to show you how important it is to have some existing designs to go off of that you can audit a little bit later on. Okay, so let's say we've audited our designs. We have a pretty good idea as the type of spacing variables that we would need in order to build out our variable library itself. So what we're actually going to do to start is, instead of being within the responsive collection here, let's go back to our brand collection. If you're not familiar with the brand collection at all, I would take a look at our Build a Design System video series, because that's going to dive, especially the first episode of that series, is because that's going to dive in deep about what that brand collection is for. Okay, so within our brand collection, maybe we might have a group first, our spacing variables, and we're going to start off using our 100 scale and build out all the variables that we would need for our individual spacing. And these variables can also apply to other things as well as you're building out your design system if you'd like. Okay, so if you know me by now, you know I like to use the 100 scale here. So I'm going to have our first value is going to be 0, and our 100 value is going to be 4. And to remember the type of the value of the variable, you can add just in brackets what that is for. But again, if you watch any of our other videos, you'll know all about this by now. So our 200 then is going to be 8. So again, although it's not those larger variables that we saw in Untitled UI, like the 32, the 64, the 96, is we do need to work our way up. And we're going to get to that very shortly. So then our 200 is going to be 8. So 8. And then our 300 is going to be 12. 312. So again, just following that 4-pixel scale for now. Our 400 is going to be 16. Our 500 is going to be 20. And eventually what we're going to do, because again, we don't want to have to get following the same scale. We don't want to have to go 4-pixel, 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 4-pixel until we reach something like 256 or 192 or whatever it is. So eventually what we're going to do is we're just going to start to double these individual values. So 500 is going to be our 20, our 20. Yep. Sorry, I should say 16. Our 600 is going to be our 24. Our 700 is going to be our 28. Our 800 is going to be our 32. 32, 28. Our 900 is going to be our 36. Actually, for 900, what we're going to do now, instead of going 36, because it is kind of an awkward size, maybe we're just going to skip right to our 40 here. And again, these values might be a lot smaller, but again, if you think about using these for the concepts of gap and padding as well for some of your smaller components, these can really, really come handy. And then let's go with our 1,000, which might be our 48. Which might be our 48. 48. And then maybe we skip the 50s entirely, and now we maybe just go 1,100, which might become that 64. 64. And then maybe our 1,200 then is then going to be that 96. Our 96 is going to be our 96. And I do get a lot of questions about what if you need to add a number in the middle. So maybe if we add 12, or let me just do some quick maths here, just so I don't lead you astray. You Yeah, so maybe if we add 8 here in the middle, this here would become our 1050. And then if we add 8 to this value here, what that's going to do is that's then going to give us our 56. And that's how you can add some values in between if you do need to a little bit later on. So this here is going to be our 56. Let me double check here. So our 1100 is our 64. So this here is going to be our 96. Sorry, I think I messed that up. Let me delete that. So our 1200s are 96. And maybe we go, sorry, let me do some other quick maths here. And then maybe if we go set our 1200 or 1300 here, 1300 to our 128. And hopefully you get the drill by now. So then maybe we double 128. Let me just do some other quick maths. And then this here becomes our 256. Our 1400 then becomes our 256. So what we essentially have done here is we've built our base scale in our brand collection. So not in our responsive collection yet, but in our brand collection, that when we go ahead and actually build our spacing variables inside of our responsive collection, we're going to connect the values in our responsive collection to our brand collection. And if this is your first time doing this, this might seem a little bit confusing, but there is a method to the madness. So bear with us, and we're going to touch upon building out our responsive variables and some of the methods in which you can do so next. Okay, now that we have our scale built out with all those different sizes, let's now look at building out what we are going to call our jumper variables back in our responsive collection. So let's go ahead here and let's just add another variable. That's a number variable that we're just going to call, 2XL. For now, and we will call this our jumper variables. Again, this is a pretty complex technique that if you master this and you show this in an interview, you show this really anywhere, is a huge flex as a designer to really understand this and get this right. Okay, so let's say maybe our 2XL. If we go back to our brand value, what value do we want that to be? Maybe we want that to be our 256. So let's go back into a responsive collection and hit the desktop value and then go into our initials. So maybe let me extend this out so we can see it. So maybe that first value for desktop is that 256, right? So then what might that be on tablet? So on tablet, let's say, maybe that becomes a 128. And again, the numbers here, would be based off what is in your design. So take everything that I'm showing you here with a grain of salt. So, and then maybe on mobile, that becomes a 96. But what's the issue with this approach? Any guesses? It's that every time you have a 256, do you always want that to be a 128 on tablet and then a 96 on mobile? The chances are probably not. To have every single use case where it's a 256, whether it's in a component, whether it's in a module, or whether it's whatever, you're not always going to want your 256 to go to a 128. So this is where we bring in the concept of jumper variables. So here, this here is going to be a 2XL to maybe a XL. Or let me think about this. Maybe we call this a 3XL, and then maybe this here is an extra large. So this would be our 2XL, and maybe this here would just be our extra large. So essentially what we're doing here is we're defining what the jumper is between our desktop and our mobile. Now, if we go with another example here, if we go with a 3XL to a 2XL, what this does is it gives us a little bit of flexibility. So instead of going to a 96, we can say that on mobile, we want it to go to our 128. So we're essentially naming our variables what the jump is between your desktop and your mobile size. So if we follow this radius all the way down here, sorry, let me go back to the brands. Maybe if I just rename this here, it's like our 3XL. Maybe this is our 2XL, 2XL. Maybe this is our XL. Maybe this is our large. Maybe this is our medium. And then maybe this is our medium. Maybe this is our small. Again, these are just the examples. Maybe this is our extra small. And again, for each of these, some of these might not be super relevant for spacing that you might not use all the time. Like if you apply a 0, you probably don't even need to apply that if you really want to, or 4 might be a little bit more of a rare value that you would use. So usually you might end up sticking with just the ones that are down here. But anyways, if I then go back to my responsive collection, and then maybe if we have just like a 2XL to just a basic XL. So then on desktop, our 2XL, and then this here would be our XL. And you can kind of define whether on tablet you want it not to be set to your 2XL or just your XL. So with this, there really is no, proper format to it. It's all based off the designs that you currently have in your Figma or in production that is ultimately going to inform the values that you have right here. So maybe we'll do a couple more. Maybe we'll go with just an XL to an XL. That's also an option. So the value for your spacing is going to stay exactly the same across each of your different values here. And then maybe we'll go with an XL to a small. So XL, and maybe here we'll keep it also an XL, and then maybe here this might become a small, and you can even go like an XL to, there's another one, an XL to a medium. So then you can go XL to a medium, and then a medium, and then maybe you want to go with a medium to a small. So this here would then become your medium, and then this here would become your small, and this might become your small as well. And you can also even work up, as crazy as that sounds, maybe you want to go to a small to an XL, to your extra large. So then this here would become your small, maybe this is also your small, and maybe this here would become your extra large. So again, what you do here really depends on the designs that you currently have in production. This is just one of those methods that sort of allows you to build those proper spacing jumps between your different mode sizes, depending on the components and the widgets that you're building. Okay, so I really want to show everyone jumper variables in action. So I just have this really sample, header here that might be on any website or landing page, whatever it is. And I'm just going to go ahead and sort of just apply some variables here real quick. So where's our frame size? Set this to 1440 to start. So when we change our mode, the device size will change with it. And let's go ahead and apply our jumper variables. So maybe we'll start off with a 3XL to an XL. And we'll do the same for our vertical and horizontal padding. Okay, so if we look at that was our 3XL to our XL, 3XL to our XL. Okay, so if we go into our variables here and we go to our jumper variables, we know that that's going from 256 to 96 on mobile. So let's just do a quick check here. So if I go to tablet, notice how the spacing adjusts with it. And then from mobile, notice how the spacing adjusts with that as well. So that's the beauty of jumper variables, is that you're able to define it. So let's just say maybe I don't like this look, and maybe I actually want to go, if I set this back to our desktop here, maybe if I want to set this, instead of it going from our 256 to our 96, maybe I want to start with our 128 and it goes from our 96, was a little bit less of a jump. So when I do that, I'm going to do the same. Again, you don't have to do the same for vertical and horizontal padding. You can mix and match. But if I do the same here, notice how the spacing on the left-hand side is a little bit less aggressive. And when I go to tablet, and then when I go to mobile, that it's much less aggressive. So you can play around with your jumper variables that way and really mix and match itself. Now, your jumper variables are one way to organize your responsive variables, but you can also have component-specific responsive variables, and we're going to take a look at that real quick next. Okay, jumper variables are great because they can be used anywhere in your design, on a landing page, in a modal, in a card, in an overall widgets, in a section block, really anywhere. But sometimes whenever you're applying these jumper variables to everything within your design, things can kind of get lost a little bit. So one approach I do see a lot of designers doing, and something that I do as well sometimes, is I have my generic jumper variable collection, but then I do also have component-specific variable collections that may or may not tie back to that brand scale that we built a little bit later on. So let's cover this just at a really high level. So let's go ahead back into our spacing variables, and maybe we want to create one for like a form, a section for a form. So a form, maybe we might go with a width. So let me close this here. And this is where having your designs already ready, or at least having, a frame that you can play around with to input your variables in, to sort of give you a more realistic, look at what these variables will do to your designs helps. If you do this point blank with no reference designs to go off of, it's not going to go well. So let's just say we have these forms here. And again, they're not the best looking forms, but they are just some forms. So let's say a couple things here, width. So maybe if we start off looking at our width, maybe on desktop, we want 876 as the width of our form. Again, an ideal world, you go and make sure this ties back to like your 4 pixel or 32 pixel scale, whatever that is. On tablet, maybe this is a 620. And then on our and then on our mobile, maybe it's a 355. Again, these are not the best examples in the world, but there are examples. So then what we can do on our main component, then we can go ahead and apply that variable with the form of width. So then when I drag, bring these down, so then when I bring that form in, notice how the width of that form changes accordingly. And then also too, we can also do that horizontal padding, where if you want to keep that, like the horizontal padding between your forms consistent. So you might only go from like a 2XL to, that's probably a bad example, but like a medium to a small. You never really go from what I'm trying to say is you would only really have one type of jumper variables for the padding of your particular form. Sorry, that took a while to get out. But so let's go in here and let's take a look at it. Sorry, I wish I had a bigger screen. So maybe on our desktop, it's a 64. On our tablet, it's also 64. But then on our mobile, maybe it goes to like an 18, something like that. So let me go ahead then and undo that. So set that back to 64. So then what I can go ahead and do then is I can go into my form variables. We can go horizontal spacing. And what we can do then is apply, so this is like 64. On tablet, it might be 64. And then on mobile, it might be, what was the value I said? 18. So there we go. So So if we go ahead and apply that variable now, so look for our form, our horizontal spacing on our form, I can see that adjusts. That's still 64. And then when I bring that into our mobile frame, I can see that then adjusts to 18. So that's just a real other approach. I love swapping designs between modes. I think it looks awesome. Just seeing how everything comes together. But that's just a real, like another good example as to how you can have component specific spacing variables that don't necessarily apply to the jumper scale that we built a little bit later on. So here you can have things like gap. You can get into, field width, all these other types of variables in order to build your responsive collection. But it's another easy way to easily organize some of the variables for some of your components as well.